important lectureship that we're holding today. Dr. Don Fournier was a member of our gratis clinical faculty who served the allergy immunology program for many years. Unfortunately, died at a young age. And this memorial presentation is really in his honor. We do this every year. You'll learn more about it in a couple of seconds. But I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Curtis Hedberg. Kurt was one of the fellows in our allergy immunology program who now is in successful practice in Northwest Arkansas, and he has been a faithful follower of Dr. Fournier, has been here multiple times to help us open this lectureship. So I'll turn it over to you. Following Kurt's introduction, Dr. Bonner will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Bocchini. It's a pleasure to be here again to honor this great teacher and this great professor. So, Don Fournier was a 1974 graduate of the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. He did an internal medicine residency and allergy immunology fellowship at Wilford Hall, U.S. Air Force Medical Center in San Antonio. He was certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine as well as the American Board of Allergy and Immunology. And at numerous societies that he frequently attended, everyone who went to these professional meetings knew that Don was always there. He was always a joy to see and kept everybody in their laughing, happy spirits. Participated in the Texas and the Louisiana state societies as well as a number of our national and international societies. He was a member of the editorial board of the Allergy and Asthma Proceedings. He was a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force. In addition to his solo practice, he participated in a number of different scholarly activities. And probably most importantly here is that he served here at LSU as gratis faculty for a number of years. He had positions as president of the Texas Allergy and Asthma Society, as well as governor of regional, state, and local allergy and asthma regional societies. He was so as a volunteer faculty person here, he would drive from Texarkana to here most every Friday and had a fellow clinic where many of the fellows learned from him. He was a great teacher. There's always something about how he presented things that was able to make things very well understood. He passed away after a short illness on February 9th, 2008. We were just talking about that, trying to remember how long ago it was. It just seems like it was yesterday, but it's been 10 years ago. At the age of 58, which is kind of scary because I'm approaching that age very quickly. So to commemorate his contributions to the allergy immunology section, we developed this lectureship in his honor, and I think this is probably the 9th or 10th time we've done this. So it's great to have all of you here and be part of this today, and I'll let Dr. Sammy Bonnet present our guest lecturer today, which I think you will find to be a great presentation for you. Thank you again.
Thanks, Coach. Thank you. Well, today is a very special day for me. I consider these events as glorious, joyful events. I am very elated by it because I see we are commemorating a colleague whom we appreciated and contributed to the program of allergy immunology here and to the allergy specialty in general, regionally and nationally. Second, also to see Dr. Kurt Hedberg, who's my first fellow here 16, 17 years ago, as flourishing and prosperous and having expanding practice in Arkansas. That pleased me a lot with his success, not just in practice, but also extending activities nationally, and I expect him will continue. Another fellow also, Dr. Dave Kaufman, is here also in the front row. He graduated 10, 12 years ago, and he was in Florida for several years, but came back to Shreveport, and as a clinical faculty also contributes well for us. And to have the speaker of today is a very highlight for me. When I tried to prepare an introduction for him, I found it's much easier for me to prepare a presentation for a grand rounds than to introduce this speaker. He's very special, he's unique. Although every speaker we got nationally here has their own scientific and personal exceptional qualities. The same thing for today for Dr. Lanier. He's a graduate from University of Texas in Galveston, had his internship also there and pediatric residency at Wilford Hall. He was at the Air Force, and after serving for some time there, went for a fellowship in Galveston and returned to the Air Force. He started right away activities to help set up a training program in allergy immunology. He went to private practice, founded a large practice that's very thriving today, that where he also included a center for clinical trials. Almost every new biological medicine introduced for asthma was tried there, so he was influential in getting approval of the newer medications. He has major contributions in allergy immunology through his clinical practice that he opened for students, residents, and guests outside. I markedly envy him for that because he was able not just to go to teach out, but bring people to his practice and to his home to host them for a long time. And I was unable to do that because of some institutional regulations and my time as well. So I markedly admire him for this. So he contributed to patient care, to drug trials, publications, teaching, activities at regional, national, international organizations. And that's a very exceptional man to do that. Okay. That, thanks. I think this is total. Yeah, thanks. He formerly served on the board of directors, then president of the Fort Worth Academy of Medicine, where he is spending most of his life there. Board of Directors of Texas Medical Association Foundation, Board of Directors American Lung Association, Board of Directors Joint Council of Allergy, the World Allergy Organization Board of Directors, which is the highest organization in our specialty, President of the Association of Certified Allergists, has numerous major services for community organizations, and even ran for Congress in Texas District 12. A very diversified, colorful, multi-talented person that we envy what he is doing. He's also a media experience. He's a medical commentator for newspapers, radio, and TV, founder and director of Academy of the Radio and Television Health Communicators, founder and president of the National Association of Physician Broadcasters, AMA Award for Health Education, appearances on many TV programs including Oprah, well, what else? Nighttime with Ted Koppel, Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, Good Morning America, Today Show, and so forth. How can a person does like that? Yesterday at the dinner, some people asked me, did you see the TV program of so? I said, no, I don't have time. Look at this guy, he is creating the TV and the media. In addition to that, he has multiple hobbies: fishing, photography, sport writer, computer whiz, a handyman. His wife, who she did not come this morning, she's resting at the hotel. She said that give him a roll of duct tape and some wire and he can fix anything. So all this in one person. What an exceptional guy. Of course, he took a lot of honors and awards, like the American Academy of Family Physicians Active Teacher Award multiple times, Achievement Award, the American Lung Association, and by the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, where his heart and body and life in there. He was awarded by all the prestigious awards, the Bila Sheikh Memorial Lectureship, Distinguished Fellow, Distinguished Service, and he became the president of the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. He also was in the executive medical director afterwards. That was a new position in recent years was created. And above all, the Gold-Headed Cane Award for the high standard of scientific achievements and contributions, as in this picture. Quite a person, no doubt. We traveled a lot together. Almost in every continent we have been there, and we sometimes have to identify ourselves by putting any kind of mark on us to be identified. So that's in this picture. He is very popular. Wherever he goes, it just people just love him. He's clear cut. You don't read in between the lines with Bob Lanier. He can see in his features what is inside his head. And I like that personality. There is no grayness in him. When the leadership of the college wanted to create the position of the executive medical director to help the president, we could not find better than Bobby Lanier among numerous candidates. So he was of tremendous help to me. I acknowledge that, and I will never forget your services, Bob, for that. Well, he's a friend, so when I say something that he likes, he makes him happy like that. But if I say something doesn't like, he look like that. And even the differences can be worse. And friendships are measured by differences. How friends deal with difficulties and differences. That's what makes a good measure. So sometimes we just differ slightly, but when we differ a lot, still we can settle it. We just, in a civilized, nice, pleasant way, we discuss it among ourselves until we settle it. And we just be happy again, friends again. That's it. Everything is settled. There is no hard feelings. It is a pleasure to have the speaker of today, particularly since he has many common things with Don Fournier, whom we are honoring today. Both of them are Texans. They were in the military service in Wilford Hall. They both were in private practice at the cutting edge. They volunteered in academic clinical faculty, And both of them were presidents of Texas Allergy Immunology Society. Great sense of humor by both of them, and they are close friends. Really, I could not find a better guest to get today for this event than Bobby Lanier. Please welcome with me Dr. Lanier is going to speak. And this is a plaque in appreciation of your coming to us.
Thank you very much. We'll let the press pool work for a moment.
Thanks. Well, thanks.
We're good. We're good.
Thanks.
Yeah. Great. Great. Thank you, Sammy. I was thinking as Sammy was doing all this business about introduction, what the difference between that and my obituary will be. And the four-star telegram, it will say, he lost in 1989, services will be held at Greenside, and that'll be it. Different things for different people. I did know Don Fournier very well. He was a student of mine when I was at the University of Texas at Galveston. And then I went to the Air Force, and doggone, he came and followed me. And he was a resident there, and also it's okay, a resident there, and also had eventually started in the department that I'd started there at Wolford Hall. That was the first thing we did, Sammy, was set up a program there in pediatric allergy. So I had a long experience with him, and we had great times. He was a really funny guy. Had great concepts about teaching and what we do, even though we were in distant cities. We'd oftentimes at meetings would sit down and explain, how do you explain this to a patient? You know, how do you explain what an antibody is to a patient? We would throw those kind of things out all the time. You know, this is allergic problems is an antibody-induced disease. People know what an antibody is. They got no idea. So the jargon that we used, we tried to separate out and to do it so that we could do concepts rather than facts, which is what I'm going to do with you today. If you came here looking for prep for the pediatric boards, you were going to be sorely mistaken. But if I can get a couple of concepts over, I'll just be thrilled as peach. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about one of the great lectures that Don gave. Actually, Don was not Texan. You know, he was born in Maine and moved to Texas. But he had a great lecture where he talked about flounders. And I'm not sure if anybody in the room has ever seen this. Like, had you seen that one? Yeah, he did this in the military too. And what we were trying to do is to provoke ridiculous thought, to think about a common subject. And Don had a theory. If you know anything about flounders, you know that they have a dark side and a white side, and the eyes are on the top of the fish, and on the bottom is pretty much plain. And Don had a theory that you could have an allergy to the dark side of a flounder, but not the white side. And he commenced to prove that with a series of rational statements and references and articles, to the point that we were just all in tears because if you manipulate the medical literature enough, you can prove just darn anything you want to, which is what I'm going to do today. Because I'm going to talk about, and I expect you to call me on it too. I'm going to talk about why allergy can be good for you. Now, the people that come in to see me are always embarrassed about having allergy. They say, I got a weak immune system. I need it built up. I said, oh, Lord, no, you need it torn down. I mean, it is too strong. But the feeling is that, A, everybody's got allergy, which is not true. And therefore, if they can't handle their allergy, they must be a weenie, which is not true. and they're just looking for a way to get some help. And so I oftentimes tell them that having allergy carries with it some significant benefits, and that you may or may not know these benefits, but I'm going to show you a few of them because there are some interesting developments between particularly helminth parasites and man, going back to the very, very beginning, that are interesting to me at least. I'm an investigator. I usually have to have these COI things. I don't have any stock and no advisory boards right now. And we're going to try to show you the genetic superiority of people with allergy and how allergy fits into the normal immune system. Okay, first thing, give me a resident here, one that really knows their stuff. How many people have allergy, do you think, in the world? Yeah, you. Yeah, you're studying for boards, you should know this. How many people have allergy? Okay, I'll give you a range. Over 50% or under 50%? Over 50%. You weren't listening a while ago. You're not going to do well on these boards unless you listen now. Actually, the figure is debatable in that it depends on how you define it. But current thinking is probably somewhere on the order of 20%. Now, you can give 5 or 10% on either side of the coin, but it's not as common as you might think. And I think that patients need to understand what they have in order to be able to appreciate the chronicity of the problem, because it's very predictable. I've been in practice now 40 years, so I've seen a zillion kids that were 2 years of age, and 6 years of age, and 20 years of age, and 70 years of age. I know how this is going to go. And so I generally end my first consultation with a prophecy about how this is going to go for children. And because of those things, I'm remarkably active. But at least 20% people are thought to have some form of allergy. Now, if you extend that into delayed hypersensitivity, you probably kick it up quite a bit. Okay, so you did so well on that first question. Now I want to give you an opportunity. Just exactly what is allergy? Do what?
An immune response.
An immune response, okay. That's pretty technical. Anybody else got a better thing than that? All right, I'll come back to you. It's hard to know. I did a search, a Medline search on this, and asked the question, what is allergy? And although I got almost 500,000 responses, not a single one of them told me what allergy was. They told me the techniques and how to describe it and how to investigate it, but not many people really know what it is and why. So we'll go back to the original definer here. This was a fellow named von Pouquet, who described allergy as altered reactivity. I think it was 1904, Sandy. Was he one of your students? Yeah, okay. Around 1904, he described allergy as altered reactivity due to prior exposure. Now, that was, what he was trying to say, I guess, is that, okay, this year you have trouble with ragweed and you see it a lot more and you get more allergic to it, and so it's altered reactivity. But you could take that definition and apply it to a lot of social situations. You can say the first time you saw your mother-in-law, you didn't particularly care for her, and every time thereafter, you don't care for her more, you are by definition allergic to your mother-in-law. Or Chevrolets or needles or anything else that you want to plug in. So we're going to try to define that just a little bit more and talk about what the basis of this is, and to ask the big question, which is why these people are icons in allergy. You may not recognize them. That's Eli Melser. Exactly why is allergy? I mean, why did God create a defense system that would give you trouble being outdoors or eating a peanut or anything? Why would he do that, being an all-loving and all-knowing God? And the answer is he didn't. Now, I'm going to get some confirmation from him pretty soon. And that's one of the first questions I'm going to ask, is have I been telling the story all this time? But when you try to search this thing out about exactly why is allergy, you go to Medline and you get some search results, and I got 1,785 results, and I looked through there, and you know how when you put in something in Medline, half the stuff in there doesn't have any application of what your search terms were, and so when I go through there, I was totally unsatisfied. I could not answer the question from the medical literature about why is allergy. So I decided to go on. And in the process, have developed a theorem that I now present to my patients as fact that describes their medical condition. I tell people with allergy now they represent genetic superiority. It's a truth. They live longer. They have less likely cancer. At this time, Dr. Bond is saying, dude, why did I invite him? Less likely to have cancer. You know that kids don't have appendicitis who have allergy? Start checking. There's some interesting new data on that. Not much in the way of IBS and allergy. You're definitely more attracted to the opposite sex. And having allergy has been correlated with being better in business. Okay, I'll show you. I'm proving this thing to you in a minute. And to say that allergic people who survived parasitic epidemics, right? I mean, because that's what we think it was for. Those people married other survivors, and it forms a clone. So you can almost say, when you see somebody with a positive skin test, they represent the survivors of parasitic epidemics. That's always a good conversation starters, too. But genetic superiority is something everybody likes to hear. They like to hear a couple things. They like to hear their name called a few times during the consultation, and they like to be known as superior. So this is my contention. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at both the T cell and the B cell and the basic efforts that these cells make with whether or not people, whether the B cell or the T cell affects inside or outside the cells. One of the differentiations, you know there are plenty more. Then we're going to get this, we're going to spend most of the time on the antibody side as opposed to the non-programmed size. And it's amazing to me as I look back in history and my area of interest and competency, if there is any, is in antibody function and monoclonal antibodies. And I look back at this and find that even as early as 1890, that von Behring was beginning to make work on vaccines. Of course, before that, in 1878, Jenner had described people being given cowpox not to get smallpox, so we knew there was some immunization possibility. Van Behring and a few more people and his students developed a vaccine for tetanus. That was a pretty big event because at that period in history, doctors couldn't do squat for you. There were no drugs. In 1894, the first drug in Germany was put out, and that was aspirin. And before that, it was nothing. So you could get your leg sawn off if you got a gunshot through it, which is the derivation of the term sawbones, especially for Civil War actions. But there was not much a doctor could do for you except give you a poison, a silver, an arsenic, whatever. And to have something that would actually work, like a vaccination, was really a huge jump forward. When Behring did it with, and his group did it with tetanus, and other people began to look at it too. And then that was the way it stood until about 1970, when these two guys discovered the allergic antibody. Oh, I should put those three guys in. Sorry about that. These Izuzakas who were in Denver, and Dr. Johansson, who was in Sweden, simultaneously and very collegially decided to publish together the function of the antibody known as E. Now, we had known about that antibody, kind of. We knew its reputation. We knew you could see its tracks for many, many years. The first skin test done in the 1870s by Blakely, noting that if kids skidded in the grass, they come up with whelps. And he put it together that it must have been a toxin that the grass was secreting, so they took the grass and shook it in the bag and sprinkled it on the skin and scratched through it, and aha, for skin test. So they knew something about what it did, but nobody knew what it was. And what it is, of course, is an antibody in relatively small relatively small levels in the immune system. But once we began to look at that, we began to understand more the basis of exactly what allergy was. I won't say it was voodoo and black magic before, maybe it still is, but allergists felt very vindicated for having now a mechanism of action. I was an intern in pediatrics at the time and was so wowed by this discovery and a chance meeting with Johansson, and I decided that my specialty was going to be immunology. And it changed my life, and I'm still running after this guy who may be 100 years old now, but acts like Dr. Bonnie is about 70, and still got more energy than anybody in the world, except for you, maybe. So these are the pioneers of the actions. Antigens are materials that produce an allergic response. And the question is, why are these antigens? What makes an antigen? And John Muir, who was a noted conservationist, had a nice quote that I remember. It says, "Man seems to be the only animal whose food soils him, making it necessary much washing and shield-like bibs and napkins. Moles living in the earth and eating slimy worms are yet as clean as the seals or fishes who lives in one perpetual wash." Why do people have allergy? Animals don't generally have allergy, with the exception of dogs and cats who live with humans, which maybe is their problem. But animals in the wild do not have allergy. I've only seen one case for that. I'm the zoo allergist for the Fort Worth Zoo. You didn't put that up there. I'm a consultant for the Fort Worth Zoo. However, I've only had one consultation in 40 years because animals don't have allergies that are in that exotic theme anyway, except for I had a baby baboon that had sort of an asthma-like condition, and was consulted on that. And I tried to, what they were having to do then is just dart this baboon and put him in a big bag and give him steroids. I mean, give him inhaled steroids, and he'd breathe in there for a while. There's got to be a better way to do that. So I got one of my pharmaceutical reps to give me about 50 of these little incentive whistles. I went over to the zoo every day for about 3 weeks and tried to incentivize this baboon to suck. I figured if I can do it in a 2-year-old child, surely I can do it in a baboon. They're pretty smart. You can't get in the cage with them, man. They rip your face off. Even little ones will. So after 3 weeks, I could get the baboon to finally, and got a treat. And we put him on Asmonate. And it helped. And I'm still following that baboon now, 15 years later, in different places around the country, because they'll call me and say, "Did you really teach him how to?" Yes, I did. That's maybe my biggest claim to fame. I taught a baboon how to use an inhaler. But for the most part, you just don't see animals having that in the world. Now, dogs and cats are another story, especially dogs. They get allergy, but whether they get it in the wild or not is the issue. So this is survival of fitness, and we're going to talk a little bit about parasitology now. I know it's been a while since you thought about that, but we've long known that a small fraction of environmental and food allergies that are exposed give rise to IgE. Why just those? What's the reason that some things are allergic and some things aren't? It's pretty clear now that not only the immune mechanisms of allergy and anti-helminth allergy are pretty closely related, and that some alteration between history and in genetics of people make some foods, particularly the ones that have some relativity to helminths, become sensitized. I mean, people can become sensitized to them. Now, Don and I talked about how to explain this thing a number of times. Now, I come back to it because we had this long-going relationship about how to teach people. He used to teach people by saying, well, a mast cell is like a balloon that's blown up, and he brought a pen in and popped the cell, and that was one of his ways of explaining degranulation of mast cells. And I had mine, and what I'm going to tell you is that all of them have some degree of validity. Now the question would be, in a primitive society, who would have a better chance of survival? The baby, the strong baby, or the fat old man? And you'll notice that the fat old man has got some of the characteristics of parasites. He's got a big stomach, little skinny legs, and that's one of the issues. And then you've got this big, strong baby. And indeed, in a primitive society, parasites are the number one killer of children. Number one. And it's because nobody knew anything about public health. They're walking around and crawling around and dog poo-poo and eating it and drinking it, and they pick up a worm eventually. So children were particularly valuable or at risk. The king here wearing shoes. That's a relatively recent adaptation to survival, by the way, shoes. Whenever you see, if you go to Easter services and you see Jesus in all the pictures, he's the only one wearing shoes. Everybody else is barefoot except for the soldiers and the travelers. And shoes were not really considered to be very important. They were. But in this era, when parasites were incredibly common, the people that had the best advantage were the people who had the ability to use the allergic antibody to the greatest extent. And there's a couple of reasons for that. These kids, even today, this is a child that I just plucked from the internet, but we've seen plenty of them in a clinic, and when I was in the military, we'd see them. I don't see very many today of this variety, big helmets, but do see phleral infection pretty commonly. So I like to tell people that the way the immune system works, and you work your own analogy out for these things, is that the immune system has like this gigantic grocery store scanner that is looking for very long templates. And it's doing that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's right now looking at things you breathe, you taste, you touch, and what it's trying to do is compare that to previous experiences. If you had, for example, a helminth infection before and beat it, complements of the allergic antibody and some of the other associated antibody functions that are required to get rid of parasites, that retained memory. And that's what the antibodies are really famous for, is the memory they have. You get a tetanus shot, you've got memory and a G-class antibody, and it's filed in a folder, and it's ready to be redistributed if that thing's come about. So from those kinds of experiences, the body develops these templates, and it's always looking. If it finds something that meets the criteria of parasitic development, which is usually a string of amino acids that are about 20,000 fragments long, DNA, RNA string, specific associations, it will enact the allergic antibody, and that will eventually cause histamine release. So on a clinical basis, on a daily basis, what we think that translates down to is that there's some things in nature that are darn close to parasites without any reasonable explanation. Ragweed, for example, and Ascaris lumbricoides share a number of antigens exactly the same. It's not perfect, but it's almost the same antibody. You can almost superimpose them. So you can see that if the immune system has been memory or geared to looking for this thing and finds, say, ragweed, which is close, that it might not actually do it then, but it may come back at some point and say, good enough. You got a ragweed worm. That's what's wrong with you. And antibodies get stamped everywhere, waiting for the next exposure. You breathe ragweed, the thing just starts going crazy. It's a learned experience. It's had experience before. And since histamine is the primary offensive tool of the allergic antibody system, you start sneezing, itching, having a lot of drainage, try to get rid of it, coughing, sneezing, everything would try to get rid of this thing is invoked by the allergic system. And it all has to do with the accuracy of the scanner and the association of the different proteins. But again, some proteins are pretty close, and people without a good heritage of IgE response may not identify some of these same problems. So in other words, a person with an allergic background, mother, father, sister, brother, got other diseases, may recognize or may be more aggressive about defense, and it may overlook a couple of imperfections in the scanning thing and declare ragweed, mountain cedar, whatever, as an enemy. And when that happens, of course, people have the explosion associated with allergy, and you test it by taking a little bit of the juice of the material, put it on the skin, and if there are antibodies there and they cross-react, and the mast cells get degranulated, then you can see the wheal that comes up as a result. Now, why children are more sensitive is one of the issues, and we think that infection and allergy play a big role together. Children go through the first 3 to 5 years of life getting every single thing they come across, right? I mean, how many times have you had mothers say, just got off antibiotics yesterday, what's the deal? You know, now look at his nose. Okay, we'll go another round, knowing that's a virus, you know. And they have this repetitive cycle of viruses for quite a while that really puts pressure on the defensive antibody system. And that may encourage the allergic antibody system to make some mistakes that occasionally will result in what we call allergy. It's more highly likely that way, by the way. There's some theories about why people developed it more in the last few years than before that I'll go through with you. But we think the aggression of defense that small children have leads to some untoward reactions from an antibody screening system that's just overloaded and very enthusiastic. And unfortunately, once it makes that decision, it's established in the immune system itself. Okay, this immune confusion is most marked between some like if you had to choose one thing that somebody was allergic to. It seems like cat is a ubiquitous antigen for around the world. Cat house dust maybe, and it's probably because some of the feline antigens are so close to some of the antigens in some worms that the natural tendency to make a mistake is there. Now, that's because, and you know, you can use this barcode scanner or anything you want to discuss to patients, but actually it's there because there are shared glycan epitropes between different antigens. And Sammy, here's your favorite subject, I know, is food sensitivity between shistasoma and birch and timothy grass, a lot of shared glycans. And you think that we're trying to decide today, you know, why is the epidemic of peanut sensitivity? And of course, there's some short-range experience going on now. Maybe we shouldn't have fed these kids, maybe we shouldn't have avoided feeding them peanuts for like we used to. That was an experiment that pediatricians got wrong. And then we fed them roasted peanuts when they did eat, which is worse than raw. If you heat a peanut, it exposes some of these glycan epitropes and makes it even more significant. But we know that there is cross-reactivity between some foods and some parasites. Does that rise to higher food sensitivities in children? That's one of the basic theories, and one of the things that we're experimenting with to see is there a way that we could treat allergy, perhaps by infecting people purposely with parasites in order to occupy the immune system for a while and then withdraw it, and in high-risk children not develop allergy. I'm not saying it's been done, I'm saying it's been tried. I'll show you what the results are in a few minutes, but the idea about actually using worms as therapy has been around for quite a long time, and in some areas it's a little bit more advanced than others, but primarily based upon the observation that there are shared epitopes. So this is an example of tropomyosin, and that's why I was asking you before we started, if you felt good about tropomyosin or bad, and he said, well, he didn't use it much. There's a lot of allergic reactions to it. No, not the antibiotic, the concept. Okay? This is the concept of it, in that parasitic worms contain the big antigens, but certain helminths are negatively associated with the prevalence of allergic disease, and it's kind of a contradiction that we can use looking at the tropomyosin that makes these things look similar. So we think that some of the recent data suggests that mechanisms that may prevent us, host, from developing allergic actions come from the shared experience with some worms. So worms giveth and worms taketh away. Worms have been around since time began. They precede everybody, and they may be endemic and actually be beneficial in some cases. So the peanuts and the shistasoma, I think, are some of the most interesting things. There have been some efforts to use shistasoma eggs for a vaccine. Hasn't worked. Sammy, you know anything more about the peanut vaccines based on shistasoma? Yeah, this is 217. This article is from. It's recent, and the efforts are ongoing in both Australia and France about how to develop something that might stop some of the peanut sensitivity that we see, and indeed occupy small children so that they don't become actually allergic. And there are a number of trials going on right now to try to see if we can prevent allergy. High-risk children, high-risk babies are now being treated with anti-allergic antibody, Xolair, in the first 3 years of life, with an effort to see if we could divert a percentage of those children into being normal rather than being hyperallergic by exposing them early. And that's an interesting thing that's going on in Philadelphia, and we're getting preliminary reports so far that say they may be onto something there. Okay, now here's a little spin on the hygiene hypothesis. Everybody knows what that is. That has been around for quite a while, and I'm going to take a little bit different approach. And the fellow down at the bottom of the corner there is a fellow named Sewen Chang. He was my mentor and developed the first monoclonal antibody to the allergic antibody. He was first in that line, and created some products that never made it to market, but still, he's a big giant thinker in the area. And he's looking at why the allergy, and explaining the rise of allergy, how the skewed environmental antigens may be important. And he notices that he comes from Taiwan, which still has a fair parasitic label. And his theory is that there's been a lot of changes in society in the last few years. The changes, he dates the timing of these changes to a primitive time, a pre-modern time, modern, which we're living in now, and we're about to live in a extra peachy model, which is going to be sealed environments and space stations. So there's a whole range of things there that we're looking at. And he thinks that one of the reasons that we've seen this rise in allergy has been the difference in the public health in the last few years. He points out a couple of things, I think, that if you look at evolution in its entirety, that postmodern civilization, in other words, what we live in right now, is a millionth part of the evolution of mammals. I mean, you chart this line out in this little tiny pocket of Benham, and we've seen this big change in this last postmodern thing. And that we know that some cohabitation with parasites had its advantages. When you look at places like rural Venezuela, IgE levels of 5,000 are not uncommon there. They're not allergic. They don't have skin problems. but they have these huge IgE levels. And that comes from their association with parasitosis in a rural and underdeveloped country. Now, if you saw somebody with a 5,000 IgE here, you'd be real worried about it. You'd probably work them up. But in truth, what you're going to find in most people that have 5,000 IgE is you can't find a doggone thing wrong with them. I mean, every once in a while you'll score the hyper IgE syndrome, but the majority of them are going to be associated with people who have eczema and just don't have anything else wrong with them. And sometimes I follow people now that I follow 20-something people that have IgEs over 5,000 that are adults. And I've been following them for as long as 10, 11 years now. I can't find anything wrong with them. They just hadn't developed it. Whatever it is, they hadn't developed it yet. But they have these huge levels. I told you before that allergy is not really well known in wild animals, but it is in domestic animals. And the thinking is here that you sanitize the dogs, you feed them the food, you put them in close, tight, clean circumstances, except that they're exposed to lots of house dust and mold. And they may develop some of the same diseases as humans. But nobody ever seen allergic deer or allergic gorilla. It just doesn't, it's not there. Well, maybe it hadn't been reported anyway, because people got killed when they saw it. But it is interesting to think that the only animals that have it are domestic animals. Identical twins have different allergies, you know that. That's one of the ways in a forensic area, in legal terms, that you can tell twins apart, is they skin test differently. And even though they come from exactly the same DNA, and they're exposed to almost exactly the same exposures, they'll have different skin tests. I have 36 sets of identical twins that I follow, and every one of them, the sequence is that one of the kids is horrendously allergic, and the other kid has just got nothing. Strangely, when I look at their parents, many of their parents will have positive skin tests, but no symptoms. And there's another syndrome that's waiting for you to put a name on, Kurt. Positive reactivity with no clinical symptoms, which is not an uncommon thing. But I don't think I've ever seen it discussed about. So here are the elements that have changed. We just learned how to control fire about 800,000 years ago. That's kind of important because you start thinking about cooking food and doing things differently. Shoes, 40,000 years ago. Indoor plumbing, fairly recently. For example, as fancy as the Palace of Versailles is and was, incredibly, if you've ever been to France and see this amazing place, it had outdoor plumbing. No sanitation facilities in the Palace of Versailles at all. So while we think about the 1500s, 1700s being a more progressive area, there's still a lot of notice that this is a more recent phenomenon that we live in this modern era. So the question has come up: if worms are an issue, and worms cause disease, and they do, why don't we just get rid of them? Because that's feasible in some places. And that's been done too, by the way. Some places in tropical Africa and so forth, where they try to just get rid of worms. And you can do it if you do a program. But the problem is there's some issues that come if you get rid of worms. You might have a decrease in the amount of helminth-specific morbidity, anemia, low blood weights, cognition, performance, altered vaccine response, susceptibility and infection. That's what happens when you have worms. No worms, you get allergy, you get autoimmune disease, you get metabolic disease, and you get cardiac disease. Isn't that strange? They seem to be on a teeter-totter. So the parasites have an association, and the actions that occur in the absence of parasites or in response to parasites have another. It's been sort of put on hold by the World Health Organization to put a lot of money into getting rid of worms. And they did that in Nigeria, and they found that the incidence of autoimmune disease just shot through the roof because people were looking for that kind of thing. So there is some other issues. If you have people with worms, or without worms, you have a hard time vaccinating them to other things because the immune response is low. So we're thinking that there's some reasons not to have it. One of the other theories come about with, instead of being a hygiene hypothesis, that it's an old friends hypothesis. And that is that people who, in this case, live together begin to look like each other. Okay, thank you, Sammy. That old friends are commensurate associations between some parasites and some people. So I made an assertion a while ago that allergic people live longer. Look at the date on this. This is Annals of Allergy 216, and nobody said much about that. I don't know if you recall even reading it, the allergists in the room. They should have entitled it, Allergic People Live Longer, and then people would have read it. But instead, they jacked it around association of coronary heart disease and all-cause mortality. But here's the thing, 3 to 5 years longer in several studies, epidemiologic studies that are done at McGill and done through a couple of major institutions and insurance companies say that allergic people live longer, all other sides balanced, than normal people do. Allergic people are obviously more attractive than non-allergic people. I bring in the case that Justin Bieber, Khloe Kardashian, and it brings up the issue. What about other people? And so I ran a Medline search where I looked for ugly people with allergy. Notice that I got 0 returns, which proves that allergic people are more attractive than non-allergic people. Here's one. This is Toxoplasma gondii. You get that from cats, and there's an article out here in 218, really recently, that showed that there is nations with a higher infection rate have a lower fraction of respondents citing fear of failure and inhibiting new business ventures. While correlation of these results highlight the linkage between parasitic infections and complex human behaviors, including those relative to business, entrepreneurship, and economic productivity. You didn't know that, did you? Toxoplasma gondii. So let's look at it. Who has cats in the world? Aggressive and villainous people that all have, cats. And then we have another cat here, which brings up the question of whether or not should all Republicans be treated with sulfadiazine. We haven't got to that yet, but that's it's one of the issues that we're looking at. It may prevent colitis. I'm going to have to run through you here. Relative release, prevent cancer. Here's an interesting thing I saw that I didn't see right away, but you may have seen it because it's in Pediatrics. Does allergy mitigate appendicitis in children? And this is a legitimate study where they looked at kids that went through a hospital for long periods of time, and they found that the risk of having appendicitis was inversely proportional to allergy, and that allergic kids rarely had appendicitis. Takers? Okay. Worms as treatment. We're looking at several. We think the one that has the most attraction right now is, I'll speak through, is MS. Several trials with multiple sclerosis now are looking at worm-based vaccines. And that's the one that looks like if one comes about any time in our lifetime, there will be some MS therapy that has to do with worm thinking. I don't know if you saw this child on CNN a few weeks ago, mission trip, Florida, having a great time, normal 12-year-old, except that it's a fact that filaria still is very common on beaches. And in addition, not to getting your head buried, you probably ought to wear shoes. So those things are there, and you definitely should stay away from the planet of Arrakis. Nobody here, no Dune people here. Huh? Oh, okay, all right, so here's the summary. People may live longer, have less likely cancer, appendicitis, IBS, success in business, more attractive. What else could you want? So when people tell you that they are weak and they need some help because they have allergy, relate to them that they really have genetic superiority. And they have been adapted through the ages and represent a separate clone in humanity that can be tracked. And then I'll urge you to watch fake news and see how real your news is. And that is not only in regular news, but in scientific news. Because many people will write articles, some of which I've shown you today, that have a very small point and will use a small database to make a big situation with. So I'd like to thank you for extending me the opportunity, and in the presence of Don, say how much I enjoyed working with him and how much I enjoyed his humor and his ability to teach patients and to come up with controversial topics and prove them, and always be thinking about new things. Thank you very much. Joe.
Thought-provoking presentation. I think it's wonderful. So, questions? We might have a couple minutes for questions.
I've got a question. So
Sure.
if we put somebody on allergy immunotherapy, do we decrease their genetic superiority?
No. All you're doing there is altering the T-cell response to the exposure to an antigen. That has also been looked at because allergy shots have been used for treatment since 1911. Millions and millions of people have experienced them. We've not seen any increase in cancer. There's been no untoward things that I can find at all. So I looked at it, couldn't find it, but that's always a concern. If you alter the immune system, what do you do? I'll tell you how big our concern was a few years ago when we were first developing anti-IgE, is that we knew we could capture the IgE molecule. And we thought, oh, now we're playing with Mother Nature. What if we have cancer? What if we have shortened lifespans? I mean, what if we have more worms? And so it was a kind of a Faustian deal here. We put this monoclonal antibody out and then kind of held our breath. As it turns out, the one thing that we found with anti-IgE is you have no response to worm. So if you're traveling to endemic countries, you can't do anti-IgE, that's for sure. And some of the original FDA concerns about Xolair, for example, had to do with increased cancer rates and some cardiovascular issues. The cancer rate, we found that's not true. So from the standpoint of both anti-IgE and allergy vaccination, the answer yet is it doesn't affect them as far as we can tell.
Thanks.
Good question. If not, do you have a candidate parasite or worm that you might use for children to induce an IgE response?
Dog whipworm is the one that was looking at right now. And dog whipworm doesn't invade people, but the antigen, it causes the antigenic response. And that's what's being looked at, homogeneous of dog whipworm in Australia and a couple of other places to look and see if we can actually take people before they developed allergy and keep them from getting it. And it hasn't been an easy thing to do. Not many people will let you feed their children worm parasites. But that's what we're looking at.
All right. Well, Sammy?
If we prevent the allergy, what are we going to do then?
I might have to start working for a living. Yeah, the only people that get hurt is allergy. But you know, the ability to treat allergy has been around since 1911. And I recall that talking about this was an older allergist when I was younger, and he said he felt the same way when he said the French, it's all over for us. He said the French have discovered Benadryl. And of course that was a key. And I was telling him about anti-IgE because he was about 75 then, I was about 45 and knew everything. And he said, hey, I've been around through Benadryl, I've been around through this Xolair business. There'll always be room because this is such a common issue. So I think, Sammy, we're okay.
All right, thank you.
So let's all thank Dr. Lanier for an excellent presentation.